An array initializer provides a concise way to create and initialize an array with predefined values, such as what you see here. These values correspond to the type that you define what this array is upfront. These are double values. Whenever you create a initializer list, you must declare create initialize all in one step, meaning in one line of code, and these values must be encapsulated within a pair of curly braces. Array initializers are particularly useful when you already know the contents of the array at the time of its creation, such as in the examples here. If you don't know what those contents will be at creation time, you don't use initializer. This approach can be used with both one-dimensional and multi-dimensional arrays. We'll go over multi-dimensional arrays in a later lecture. For now, just remember declaration of your array and initializing it must take place in one step. Hence, initializer. The concept here is very similar to initializing your variable. Let's say integer I equals 5. However, because we're not dealing with a list, this could be broken down into declaration and then assignment. But again, with array initializers, you must have all of it in one statement. Let's look at more examples. For one-dimensional array such as this, by the way, 1D means it grows linearly from left to right, where the very first index is 0, the second one index 1, 2, and 3, etc. Notice this must be curly braces. You cannot use bracket or parentheses. Those will not be in the correct syntax. Instead of using this, you can also use a for loop or simply just manually write them out using the array index that we went over before, with the very first element occupying index 0 to have a value 1.9, the second element occupying index 1 to have a value of 2.9. The other key note you must remember is you also have to dynamically allocate or statically allocate sufficient spaces. In this case, there are 4 elements up front. So once you allocate the space, you fill in the values in those spaces one at a time. This requires 5 lines of code versus a single line here. This is the reason why we call this a shorthand notation. Let's summarize. Key point number 1. Array initializers can only be used in the declaration statement. If you don't do that, instead, you try to use them to reinitialize an array later in your code, it will result in a syntax error like this. This syntax error is actually a compilation error. You won't be able to even compile it, let alone running it. The other key point is the size of the array is determined by the number of elements in the initializer. So in the prior example, where you see 4 elements, in this shorthand notation, your myList is allocated with 4 spaces for each of these elements. Whereas in the manual declaration, you will have to specify the exact number of elements you need and then manually fill them in like this. The last point about array initializer is it provides a clear and concise way to set up arrays when their content is known beforehand. Just remember, array initializers are a handy features in Java that helps simplify the creation and initialization of arrays, making your code a lot cleaner and shorter and more succinct, which means easier to understand. This concludes our discussions on array initializers.